Every single one of Easter Island's 887 stone giants is staring inland, and scientists just discovered they're hiding something beneath the ground that rewrites everything we thought we knew about why an entire civilization vanished. These aren't just statues, they're warmings. On the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, positioned 2,300 miles from the nearest continental shore, massive stone faces stand frozen in eternal vigilance. But here's what archaeologists kept secret for decades. The Moai weren't built to welcome visitors or guard against invaders from the sea. They were positioned to watch over something the Rapa Nui people desperately needed to protect. And when that protection failed, it triggered one of history's most catastrophic and mysterious societal collapses that experts still can't fully explain. When Polynesian voyagers first arrived around 1200 CE, they discovered Paradise, a volcanic island covered in lush palm forests reaching 80 feet tall, teeming with seabirds and blessed with rich volcanic soil. These settlers, master navigators who had crossed thousands of miles of open ocean using only the stars, established a thriving civilization that would eventually number several thousand people. Recent archaeological evidence suggests the population stabilized at 3,000 to 4,000 inhabitants, but they developed something that defies explanation. They created a sophisticated culture centered around ancestor worship, and they expressed their devotion through an ambitious project that would consume their society for over 5 centuries: the carving and erection of nearly 900 massive stone statues, some weighing over 80 tons. But here's the chilling part. Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen became the first European to land on Easter Island on Easter Sunday, April 5, 1722, and what he found terrified him. He described a population already in severe decline, living among toppled statues in a barren, treeless wasteland. The islanders were starving, desperate, and the once mighty civilization was crumbling. When Captain James Cook visited just 52 years later in 1774, he found the devastation even worse. Barely 2,000 inhabitants struggling to survive, with more statues lying face down in the dirt, deliberately destroyed. What force could annihilate a civilization so completely in such a short time? What happened to the forests, and why were the people toppling their own ancestors? For decades, scientists believed they had the answer: ecological suicide. The islanders cut down every single tree to transport their massive stone ancestors. Without trees, the topsoil eroded. Without topsoil, crops failed. Without wood for boats, they couldn't fish. Without resources, the clans turned on each other in brutal warfare. The Moai, those eternal guardians meant to bring prosperity, had instead become monuments to their own hubris and destruction. But then came the discovery that changes everything. During excavations conducted between 2010 and 2019, archaeologists unearthed something impossible hidden in the Rongorongo quarry. The bodies of the statues extend 20 feet underground, and they're covered in undeciphered petroglyphs that no one can read. And there's something else, something even more mysterious: the Rongorongo script, one of only 4 independently invented writing systems in human history. It appeared suddenly on the island, and to this day, not a single person can decipher what it says. What secrets did the Rapa Nui carve into stone before their world collapsed? What were they trying so desperately to tell us? In 1984, scientists drilling into Easter Island's volcanic lakes pulled up evidence of something that shouldn't exist: pollen from 16 million palm trees that once covered every inch of the island. By 1650, every single tree had vanished. But here's what makes this terrifying. The Rapa Nui kept carving statues for 30 years after the last tree fell, watching their world die while they chiseled stone faces of their ancestors. They knew they were doomed, yet they couldn't stop. Dr. John Flinley's groundbreaking paleontological studies reconstructed Easter Island's ecological timeline with chilling precision. When the first Polynesian settlers arrived around 1200 CE, they found approximately 16 million palm trees. The now extinct Pascalacos disperta, the Chilean wine palm's giant cousin, covering the island's 63 square miles. These forests were everything: wood for boats to fish the deep ocean waters, bark for rope strong enough to move mountains, fronds for shelter, and palm fruits that sustained both humans and the Polynesian rats they unknowingly brought with them. The rats, Rattus excellens, reproduced explosively without natural predators, and archaeological analysis shows they devoured palm seeds faster than the trees could regenerate. But the rats alone didn't doom the forest. The Moai demanded it. Archaeologist Joanne van Tilburg's research revealed something shocking. Carving and transporting a single average-sized Moai, weighing 14 tons and standing 13 feet tall, required approximately 50 to 70 trees for wooden sledges, rollers, and lever systems. Czech engineer Pavel Pavel's 2012 experimental archaeology demonstrated that moving these monoliths across the island without wheels required an intricate system of palm trunk rails and rope made from palm fiber. With 887 statues carved over 500 years, the mathematics of extinction becomes sickeningly clear. The Rapa Nui were literally converting their forest into their ancestors, one statue at a time, watching their lifeline disappear with every transport. But here's where this mystery transforms into something far more disturbing, something that suggests the Rapa Nui weren't victims of ignorance. They were witnesses to their own apocalypse. Radiocarbon dating of the last palm pollen deposits shows the final trees disappeared around 1650. Yet the Moai carving continued until approximately 1680, 3 full decades after the last tree fell. Think about that. The people kept carving even as their world collapsed around them, even as the soil eroded, even as starvation set in. Why? Were they praying for a miracle? Were they leaving a message? Archaeological evidence from this period reveals a society transforming into nightmare. Thousands of obsidian spearheads suddenly appear in the artifact record, weapons that didn't exist before. Protein residue analysis on tools shows a sharp increase in human bone processing. The unthinkable had become reality. The Moai themselves became targets of rage. Over 1/3 of all standing statues were deliberately toppled during a period archaeologists now call the Huri Moai, the statue toppling time. Brother turned against brother. Ancestor worship turned to ancestor destruction. And then, mysteriously, the violence stopped. When Roggeveen arrived in 1722, he found a broken population that had somehow survived their apocalypse. But they possessed something the Europeans couldn't explain: wooden tablets covered in bizarre glyphs that even the islanders themselves could no longer fully read. The Rongorongo script had appeared, carrying secrets the dying civilization desperately needed anyone to understand. And what those tablets reveal will shatter everything you think you know about this mystery. Stay with us on Dark Dimensions X and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next. In 1864, French missionary Eugène Hérault documented 26 wooden tablets covered in symbols that defied every known writing system on Earth, and within 3 years, the last person who could read them was dead. What died with them might be the answer to one of humanity's greatest mysteries, and we're running out of time to decode it. The Rapa Nui called them Rongorongo, meaning chants or recitations, and they claimed the tablets contained sacred knowledge passed down from their ancestors. But here's what makes Rongorongo archaeology's most heartbreaking mystery. By the time Europeans began seriously studying them, not a single person on Easter Island could read them anymore. The knowledge had died with the last generation of learned scribes, extinguished during the catastrophic events of December 1862, when Peruvian slave raiders launched coordinated attacks on the island. They abducted 1,500 islanders, including every remaining scholar, priest, and keeper of ancient knowledge, and shipped them to South American guano mines, where most died within months. Those who returned brought smallpox that killed 90% of the remaining population. By 1877, only 111 Rapa Nui survived. The voices that could read Rongorongo fell silent forever. Only 26 Rongorongo artifacts survive today, scattered across museums worldwide, but what they contain might be priceless beyond measure. The script itself defies everything linguists thought they knew about writing systems. It's written in reverse boustro-fade-on. Alternating lines read left to right, then upside down right to left, forcing the reader to physically rotate the tablet with each line, as if the act of reading itself was a sacred ritual. The glyphs depict bizarre combinations that seem almost alien. Humans with bird heads, geometric patterns that suggest mathematics or astronomy, creatures that blend plant and animal forms, and symbols that repeat in sequences suggesting either poetry, genealogy, or ritual incantation. Linguistic analysis has identified approximately 600 distinct glyphs, far too many for a simple alphabet, suggesting a logosyllabic system as complex as ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. But every attempt to crack the code has led down increasingly strange and contradictory paths. In 1958, German anthropologist Thomas Barthel claimed to have partially deciphered Rongorongo, identifying a lunar calendar and genealogical chants, yet his interpretations remain disputed, and 70 years later, no scholar has successfully translated a complete text. The Moai tablet, housed in Rome's Museo Pigarini, contains what appears to be an astronomical calendar marking lunar phases with precision. But why would a dying civilization, watching their forests disappear and their society collapse into cannibalism and warfare, dedicate precious resources to carving elaborate celestial observations? What were they tracking? What were they waiting for? The most chilling detail emerged from interviews conducted by Catherine Routledge in 1914 with the last surviving islanders who remembered fragments of the old ways. They told her something that changes everything. Rongorongo wasn't meant to be fully understood by reading alone. The tablets were memory aids for trained chanters who would hold them during ceremonies and recite from memory the knowledge encoded within. Oral traditions that lasted hours, containing genealogies, navigation instructions, agricultural rituals, and spiritual wisdom. The symbols were triggers, not text. When the chanters died in the slave raids, the tablets became useless relics, unless the Moai themselves hold the key. What archaeologists discovered between 2010 and 2019 didn't just rewrite Easter Island's history, it destroyed it completely. The statues everyone thought were heads? They have bodies extending 20 feet underground, covered in carvings that match the undeciphered Rongorongo script. And the quarry where they were carved? It wasn't a graveyard of ecological collapse, it was a garden. The Rapa Nui weren't destroying their world, they were saving it. And then something else destroyed them. Dr. Joanne Van Tilburg's team, working with the Easter Island Statue Project during multi-year excavations, carefully unearthed 2 of the 397 partially buried moai at the Rongorongo quarry, and what they found beneath the surface defied belief. The hidden torsos were carved with crescent symbols, spirals, and designs resembling the Rongorongo script. For over a century, tourists photographed Easter Island heads jutting from the ground, never realizing that beneath their feet lay massive bodies encoded with messages that might explain everything. The statues weren't just ancestors watching over the living, they were libraries carved in stone, knowledge embedded in volcanic rock, waiting to be read. But the real revelation came from what the excavations found inside the quarry itself, and it destroys the ecological collapse theory that dominated textbooks for decades. Dr. Sarah Sherwood's soil analysis, conducted in 2020, revealed something impossible. The Ranoraku crater wasn't a monument to environmental destruction, it was a sophisticated agricultural center, one of the most advanced in the ancient world. The Moai carvers had enriched the volcanic soil with rock dust and organic matter, creating incredibly fertile gardens that sustained the island's population even after the forests vanished. Residue analysis found high concentrations of banana and taro starches, sweet potato phytoliths, and evidence of intensive cultivation that would make modern permaculture experts jealous. The people working the quarry weren't slaves destroying their world, they were farmers ingeniously adapting to environmental collapse. This discovery completely obliterates Jared Diamond's ecocide narrative. The Rapa Nui didn't blindly destroy their environment, they transformed it with ingenuity that rivals anything in human history. Anthropologist Dr. Carl Lipo's research using LiDAR technology in 2018 mapped hundreds of previously unknown agricultural structures called manavai, circular stone gardens designed to protect crops from wind and retain moisture with sophisticated understanding of microclimates. The islanders had developed rock mulching techniques that compensated for the loss of forest cover. Radiocarbon dating shows these structures were built between 1650 and 1750 during the supposed collapse, proving the Rapa Nui were actively innovating brilliant solutions to their environmental crisis, not giving up. So if ecological suicide didn't destroy Easter Island's civilization, what did? The answer arrived on European ships carrying something far deadlier than any environmental disaster. When Raghaveen landed in 1722, his crew opened fire on islanders without provocation, killing 10 to 12 people in minutes. Subsequent European visits brought devastating epidemics, smallpox, tuberculosis, and syphilis, against which the isolated Rapa Nui had zero immunity. Spanish expedition records from 1770 document a population still numbering around 3,000, adapting and surviving. But the catastrophic blow came in December 1862, when Peruvian slave raiders launched coordinated attacks, capturing 1,500 islanders in brutal raids. Those who returned brought smallpox that killed 90% of the remaining population. By 1877, only 111 Rapa Nui survived. The statues weren't toppled by warfare during ecological collapse. They were pushed over during the chaos of slave raids and European contact. The Moai witnessed everything. Today, 887 stone giants remain standing vigil over Easter Island, and they're finally about to speak. After centuries of silence, after decades of failed attempts, we're closer than ever to deciphering what the Rapa Nui carved into stone and wood before they were nearly wiped from existence. And what they were trying to tell us might change everything we understand about human resilience, collapse, and survival. The truth beneath the weathered surfaces of the Moai is more profound than any single theory of collapse can contain. The Rapa Nui didn't vanish because they were foolish or blind to their environment's limits. They vanished because they encountered the same forces that have destroyed indigenous civilizations across the globe: disease, slavery, and colonial violence, while simultaneously demonstrating some of the most sophisticated environmental adaptation in human history. They were geniuses facing genocide, not fools facing consequences. The descendants of the Rapa Nui, numbering approximately 8,000 today, are reclaiming their stolen narrative. In 2017, the Chilean government returned sovereignty of Rapa Nui National Park to the indigenous community, allowing them to control tourism and archaeological research for the first time in over a century, a restoration of power that would have been unthinkable just decades ago. Mahani Teve, a concert pianist and Rapa Nui native, founded the island's first music school in 2012, teaching children to reconnect with their ancestral culture through both traditional chants and classical composition. The whispers of the ancestors, encoded in stone and nearly silenced forever by slave raids and epidemic, are finding new voices in a new generation that refuses to let their history die. Modern archaeological research conducted over the past 2 decades has shifted the narrative so dramatically it's barely recognizable. Studies by archaeologists, including Dr. Terry Hunt and Dr. Carl Lipo, demonstrate that the Rapa Nui population remained stable at around 3,000 to 4,000 people for centuries before European contact, a sustainable adaptation to the island's carrying capacity, not evidence of catastrophic overpopulation or societal failure. The collapse that dominated textbooks wasn't an apocalypse of their own making. It was successful adaptation to island resources followed by deliberate extermination by outside forces. The Moai construction stopped not because society failed, but because the communities had completed their ancestral monuments and shifted focus to intensive agriculture that sustained them brilliantly until European ships arrived with disease and violence. The toppled statues tell stories not of internal warfare, but of desperate attempts to hide sacred objects from European looters and slave raiders who saw them as curiosities to steal. As for the Rongorongo tablets, those 26 surviving artifacts that hold the voices of the dead, advanced imaging technology is revealing details invisible to the naked eye. In 2021, researchers using reflectance transformation imaging discovered previously unknown glyphs hidden in the wood grain, suggesting the tablets contain exponentially more information than surface reading reveals. Computational linguists are now applying artificial intelligence to pattern recognition, comparing Rongorongo to other Polynesian languages and finding tantalizing connections to Proto-Polynesian mythology and navigation techniques. We may be closer to deciphering the script than ever before in history, and with it, hearing the Rapa Nui speak in their own words about what they witnessed, what they knew, what they survived, and what they were desperately trying to tell future generations. Easter Island's lesson isn't about the inevitability of collapse. It's about resilience that survives genocide, adaptation that outsmarts environmental disaster, and the fragility of isolated communities when confronted by forces beyond their control. The Moai weren't monuments to hubris, they were expressions of faith, ingenuity, and cultural identity that sustained a people through extraordinary challenges that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. Their buried bodies, covered in undeciphered symbols, remind us that history is written by those who survive to tell it, and that silence doesn't mean absence or failure. It means we haven't learned to listen carefully enough yet. The ancient whispers of Easter Island haven't vanished. They're carved in volcanic stone 20 feet underground, waiting in wooden tablets scattered across museums on 3 continents, and living in the voices of 8,000 descendants who refuse to let their ancestors be erased, forgotten, or reduced to cautionary tales. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved quickly. They're meant to be honored, protected, and passed forward to generations who will finally have the technology, the wisdom, and the respect to understand what the Rapa Nui were trying so desperately to say. And when we finally crack the Rongorongo code, when we finally read what's carved on those buried Moai bodies, we might discover that they weren't just warning us about collapse, they were teaching us how to survive it.